Why can't law school be priced like Costco, where it's like, you know that you're getting a good value? Here's the price. We're not bullshitting. That's just what it is.
Hello and welcome to episode 479 of the Thinking LSAT podcast. I'm Ben Olson. With me is Nathan Fox. We're the co-founders of LSATdemon.com and the LSAT Demon Daily podcast. Be LSAT famous, share news, and ask questions on our website, thinkinglsat.com. Wednesday, November 6th, we're going to have the November LSAT starting. And then the next week, on Tuesday, November 12th, we're going to have a free class that's Lunch Break LR. I'm guessing that's with Kaylee.
It is with Kaylee. Yep.
Yeah,
It's going to be
okay.
2 logical reasoning questions, one on the easier end and one on the harder end. And it's just a 30-minute class. I'm sure Kaylee will stick around so that you can ask whatever questions you've got. Go to
Yeah,
lsatdemon.com/free if you want to sign up for that class.
this should be good. Let's jump in. The first email is from Caroline. The subject is note-taking on the LSAT update.
Hi, Ben and Nathan. I previously reached out regarding whether or not note-taking during the test can be helpful. Ben, our previous advice would have been, don't waste your time.
Yep.
You guys went over this in episode 474, and the past few weeks I have given up my crutch of note-taking. Best decision ever, says Caroline. It was tough at first because, like you guys pointed out, I was using it as a crutch. I also did not want to give it up because it felt like a way for me to get through some boring stimuli, which we just say passages here
Yeah.
at LSAT Demon. Try to keep
Yep.
it simple.
Yep.
I think what got me out of this habit was being engaged through an attacking mindset. Now, when I approach a question, I'm not thinking, okay, what can I write down? I'm thinking, how can I attack this? This thinking is what allowed me to be engaged rather than wasting time and being distracted by note-taking. Thanks, Caroline. I saw Ben give a deep nod of agreement there, or recognition there. It kind of hit me too.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of power in having attacking is kind of a strong word, but this attacking mindset, this mindset that you're not intimidated by what's on the page, that you're leaning into it and that you're going to take whatever it is and understand it. I think when you approach the LSAT a little bit back on your heels and not in this attacking mindset, you're already giving up ground. You're already opening the possibility that you might not understand something, and that encourages you to back down when something seems convoluted, as opposed to leaning in and saying, wait a second, what did you just say? And putting the onus on the test to make itself make sense, as opposed to being like, oh, I guess I don't understand. Oh, that's so hard. Oh, should I go to the next question? There's a lot of power in negotiation when you're negotiating with other people, of believing that you can win, that you can do this. And I think that's what Caroline's doing here with the test.
Yeah, you've got to be the boss of the test. There's something about the way she said that. When I approach a question, I'm not thinking, okay, what can I write down? Instead, I'm thinking, how can I attack this?
Mm-hmm.
And just think about all the people who take notes on reading comprehension, or, in the old days with the pencil and paper test, and the underlining and the highlighting. And I guess you can still do that stuff on the digital test. But I just remember in the old days looking over people's shoulders at all the stuff that they had highlighted and all the stuff they had underlined. And it was largely stuff they didn't understand. It's like, okay, well, I don't get that.
Mm-hmm.
That must be important. Let me highlight it and like keep moving. And so it's like you're looking for things you don't understand and you're just going to highlight them and keep moving, or
Mm-hmm.
write a note or underline it and keep moving. And instead, what we're asking you to do is to slow down and actually understand it. Because we think that real progress on the LSAT, we're talking about double-digit improvement. We're not talking about 5 points or 7 points of improvement. We're talking about 15 or 20 points of improvement on the LSAT. Comes from actually getting it, like actually comprehending what you're reading. So instead of looking for things you don't understand so that you can write them down, you just stop and you reread it. You get more context. You start engaging. You start asking, well, what do you mean by that? Well, why do you say that? That doesn't seem connected to the thing you said previously. And you start trying to like fill in the blanks for them. You start thinking about what they might say next, right? So
Mhm.
you're looking at inefficiencies in what they've already said or inaccuracies or incomplete parts of what they've already said, and you're looking down the road hoping, okay, so hopefully they're going to say more about that to flesh out this shitty argument that they're making. But so that's what Caroline's doing now. Contrast that with what she used to do, which was like, whoa, I don't get this. And she's back on her heels playing defense. Oh,
Mhm.
let me see if there's at least something I can write down here.
Yeah.
And yeah, okay, but that's not helpful. All you're doing is documenting shit you don't understand instead of moving yourself toward understanding.
Yeah, she's moved from the court reporter to the prosecuting or the cross-examining attorney,
Yeah.
which is you're a court reporter. You don't have to understand what people are saying.
No,
You just next. Well, okay, what? What next
all the
word?
words.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Hmm.
Thank you, Caroline. Next
Yeah.
one is
Thank
from
you.
Alyssa. The subject is getting rid of my bad habits.
Alyssa writes, I'm stuck in the high 140s. For reference, I have ADHD. Due to this, I have a hard time taking these practice exams and studying. One of the habits I have formed is that I tend to narrow down to two answers, one being the correct one and the other always being a wrong one. In the end, I most oftentimes choose the wrong one instead of going with my gut feeling. How do you guys think I should break this habit? Also, what are your suggestions when it comes to clearing your mind? Sometimes I just have silence and it leads to me being unable to think clearly at all. Does this happen to a lot of people? Thank you guys so much for your platform. I really enjoy using it to study.
Hmm. Where do you want to start?
Yeah, let's start with I narrow it down to two and I always seem to choose the wrong one.
All right. We've talked about this 100 times on this podcast and on the LSAT Demon Daily podcast. So maybe we'll try to keep it brief. When you narrow it down to a 50-50, half the time you're going to get it right, half the time you're going to get it wrong. But when you're reviewing your test, you're going to notice all the times that you got it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So for sure, Alyssa is falling victim here to selection bias.
Yeah.
She's thinking that, it's just obvious. Yeah. When you go review your mistakes, there's going to be a lot of them there that you narrow down to a 50-50 and missed.
Mm-hmm.
But don't take away from that. I need to go with my gut or I always choose the wrong one. No, you don't, Alyssa.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
a 50-50, and your problem is narrowing it down to a 50-50 in the first place. Students think narrowing it down to a 50-50 is good. Actually, narrowing it down to a 50-50 is pretty bad. There's
Yeah.
only one right answer. There's four demonstrably, provably wrong answers. And so, two tips for Alyssa. One, have a better idea what you're looking for before you start reading the answers. Make better predictions. Two, when you start reading answers, you're looking for reasons why they're wrong, not looking for reasons why they're right. A's wrong 80% of the time. You need to expect it to be wrong and look to dismiss it instead of making a case for A, then making a case for B, and always ending up in a situation where you've got two or more contenders. That's just not a good sign. It's a much better sign if you're eliminating all five on your first pass through because you're keeping your standards really high and yeah, being in that like attacking mode where you're just not going to settle for bullshit. It's not like, oh, I'm going to half understand this test. I'm going to fully understand this test, which is why I'm going to conclusively eliminate that and eliminate that and eliminate that. Oh, here's one that I can't eliminate. Now that I think it all the way through, makes a lot of sense. Eliminate one more answer and you've solved the question
Yeah.
instead of narrowing it down to a 50-50 toss up all the time.
Yeah. I mean, I totally agree. Make better predictions and be more eager to cross out answer choices. I would also emphasize, and I think this is inherent in her question, by talking about answer choices, you're focusing on the wrong part
Yeah.
of the question.
Yeah.
your problem started in sentence 1 of the
Yep.
passage, and everybody is very like, or not everybody, but a lot of people, especially when they first start studying, when they're talking about the 2 answers that they got it down to, they're so obsessed with what's different between the 2 answer choices. Why is one wrong? Why is
Yep.
the correct one correct? And it's like, that's not where your problem is. That's part of your problem, but the real problem is the passage.
Yeah, and it's because you didn't spend enough time in the passage in the first place. You didn't really understand what you read. You didn't really understand what they were asking you about what you read. You
Mhm.
either didn't make any prediction at all or you made a misguided prediction because you didn't really understand those two things.
Mhm.
Then you're going in you're it's like you're looking in the haystack, but you don't even know what you're looking for. You don't even you're looking for a needle, but you don't know that. You're just kinda going through the haystack. Huh?
Yeah. Yeah.
If I ain't gonna get it done, right? So, um, yeah, 100%. There's like this 80-20 thing, right?
Yeah.
Where novices or people at Alyssa's level, stuck in the 140s, Alyssa is spending 80% of her time on the answers.
Mhm.
And she
Mhm.
needs to start spending 80% of her time on the passage and really understanding it. You can unlock it before you ever start reading A, Alyssa, and that's your problem. You're doing it the hard way, you're doing it the confusing, not fun way. And you could do the test in a much easier way if you would just slow down and really understand those passages and really understand the questions that they're asking you about those passages and making strong predictions. Do you wanna chime in? Oh, go ahead. Sounds like you have more to
Yeah.
say about that.
No, I was just actually I was gonna move to this piece on silence. Is that
Sure.
what you were going to as well? Like she says, "What are your suggestions when it comes to clearing your mind? Sometimes I just have silence, and it leads me to being unable to think clearly at all."
I mean, at the top, she said she has ADHD and due to this has a hard time taking these practice exams and studying.
Mhm.
Combining those two things together, it's a lot of roadblocks that I'm hearing.
Mhm.
It's a lot of reasons why Alyssa doesn't think she can be successful. And so I don't know. It's like, how bad do you want this, Alyssa? I don't know. I don't want to come off like a dick, but It just it's like, "Alyssa, are you feeling that maybe this isn't the right fit for you?" Because if that's the case, that's totally fine. It's not the right fit for lots of people. So if you don't wanna do it, if you just can't make yourself sit down and do it, if you're gonna just have these roadblocks, take a break, go do something else for a while, see how much of a burning desire you really have to be a lawyer, because, like, the work ethic that's gonna be required in law school is higher than this. I mean, the burden is only going to grow.
Mhm. Yeah, it's also possible that Alyssa is trying to bite off more than she can chew, kind of like what you're saying, by doing practice exams, right? Like a lot
Yeah,
of people, even if you don't have ADHD, shouldn't be sitting down and doing practice exams. Like that's the
people at
first
her
thing you
level,
mentioned. Yeah,
how many practice tests do you think Alyssa should do if she's in the 140s?
one a month at
That's what I was
most.
going to say. One a month.
Yeah, yeah.
And Alyssa, the bulk of your work right now should be, well, the bulk of your work should always be reviewing your mistakes.
Hmm.
That's why you can't do full practice tests very regularly when you're in the 140s because every test you take there's too many mistakes that you need to review, and you need to
Yeah.
thoroughly review those mistakes. And you'll learn more by reviewing the mistakes right away. So I would say, Alyssa, do drilling one question at a time and
One question
immediately
at a
review.
time. Yeah. You do one question and you're feeling distracted. Okay. Go do something else, then come back and do another question. You can do a lot of questions with just a lot of breaks and maybe start getting better and better at each question, which then makes it easier to do more of them together. You just might
Mhm.
not be there yet.
Yeah, and but then when you review, because I can tell that Alyssa's not reviewing the right way either, right?
Hmm.
Alyssa's like, well, I should have just gone with my gut. And that's the lesson she's taking away from
Yeah,
these
no, no, no. You got
50-50s.
to understand, why is it explicitly right or wrong?
Yeah, it's like, Alyssa, you made multiple mistakes when you missed that question. You misunderstood the passage, you misunderstood the question, you misunderstood the wrong answer that you picked, you misunderstood the right answer that you didn't pick. Some combination of those things, like you've made multiple mistakes. You picked a wrong answer and you failed to pick the right answer. That's multiple mistakes per question. So
Mhm.
this simplistic, like, oh, well, I always just narrow it down to a 50-50 and I need to trust my gut more. No, you don't. You need to actually solve these questions. And when you go in and review, you need to solve them, right? Could you explain it to a friend why the right answer is right and why the wrong answer is wrong? And are you taking anything away from that? Like, did you learn anything from that? Half the time, the lesson's going to be, I need to read more carefully.
Yeah.
But the takeaway is guaranteed not, I need to trust my gut. Every time I narrow it down to a 50-50, I just pick the wrong one. That's
Yeah.
not, that's not true and it's not productive.
It's wildly oversimplifying things.
Yes.
Let's take a look at this next email because
Okay.
Kaylee's subject is review, which is what we're talking about, and maybe we can keep going.
Sure. So Kaylee says, hi, Ben and Nathan. When studying, if you're getting answers correct, would you still be reviewing why you got the answer choice correct? Would you recommend still going through the explanations on the demon, even if you got the answer correct? Space question mark. Thanks, guys. Love the podcast. Space exclamation point
Hmm.
dash Kaylee.
Okay, so the answer to this question is it depends. In general, if you got the answer right, there's no need to review. But of course, if you got it right and you didn't feel confident in the answer that you chose or why you chose it, or if you had any question about any aspect of it, sometimes people get questions right, but they don't understand why B is wrong. Great. Review it then and learn more about that
And
question and why B is wrong.
especially when you're drilling, right?
Yes.
It's harder on timed sections. It's even harder on full practice tests.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're drilling, because I do it too, right? When I do new questions that I've never seen
Mm-hmm.
before,
Mm-hmm.
I am frequently, I kind of grit my teeth, right? It's sort of like, well, I'm not 100% sure why. I am sure I'm missing something here, but I'm pretty sure the answer is D. I just don't know exactly why. And I click D and then it turns green. In class, I just go, okay, great, I got it right. Cool. Like we'll have a full
Yeah.
written explanation that to explain more of that. You can use the ask button if you want more explanation on that. We'll workshop it and figure out exactly why the wrong answers are wrong and exactly why the right answer is right. In the moment, I'm not always gonna really feel not on 100% of the questions. I'm not gonna feel like I've solved 100% of the questions.
Mm-hmm.
But boy, if I was drilling, that's exactly where I'm gonna then go, oh shit. Let me look at the written explanation. Let me watch any video explanations that are there. Let me use the ask button if necessary to get some clarity about that question. Because even though I got it right, I know that there was something there that I didn't quite get.
Yeah, and even if you got it right and have a very good reason why you chose that answer, you could at the very least just confirm. Just say, "Hey,
Sure.
I think it's right for that reason." You look at the
Yeah.
explanation and you're like, "Oh, that
Or,
is right." And that builds your confidence and builds your
yeah.
gut
Yes.
gut if you want to talk about that.
And
Yeah.
you could also look at the wrong, if there was a wrong answer that you felt like, well, maybe that one.
Mhm.
But I don't think so. Not really. I don't know. I think this other one's better. Well, okay, if you got it right, yeah, let's go look at the explanation for that wrong answer and the explanation for the right answer. Let's make sure that it's fitting with what I thought. Boy, how often, Ben, do students get questions right for the wrong reasons?
Oh, that's very common.
All the time.
All the
All the
time.
time. And we do too. I mean, look at my old written explanations that I wrote 10 years ago, right? When I was doing like
Mhm.
high volume of writing explanations. I would get them right for the wrong reason all the time.
Yeah.
And now we're more technically correct because we have a whole team of editors working through those explanations and making them better. But as a student, if you're Kaylee, yeah, when you're doing that one question at a time, if you got it right but didn't feel great about it, then yeah, that question definitely has something to teach you. Do you think that helps Alyssa?
I hope so.
Yeah. She's having a hard time finding motivation. Maybe she needs some quick wins.
Yeah.
So I would think drilling is the way to get those quick wins. So step away, Alyssa, from the full tests, step away even from the timed sections. Just drill one question at a time. If you're thoroughly reviewing, you should see your ratings go up in the demon. And maybe that gives you a little bit of motivation to do some of the other harder stuff.
Great.
Next one's from Heather. The subject says, question on reasoning validity in parallel reasoning questions.
Hi, Ben and Nathan. In parallel reasoning questions, I've noticed that sometimes the question stem explicitly states that the reasoning in the stimulus, man, people
Passage.
just love that word, in the
STEM and
passage.
stimulus. They love STEM and stimulus. So instead of question STEM, you can just say question.
Yep.
And instead of stimulus, you could say passage or argument. Okay.
hmm There's always the problem, of course, that question could refer to the entire thing. So
Sure.
sometimes I've said prompt. What do you think about the word prompt?
Prompt's fine. I mean, and honestly, there's nothing that wrong with, well, STEM just does seem very strange. I don't know.
And
I mean, also the
stimulus.
passage is part of the prompt.
Yeah.
I don't know. I like question best, but
Yeah. Yeah. Anyways, Heather says, I've noticed that sometimes the question stem explicitly states that the reasoning in the passage is flawed, while other times it does not. In
true.
cases where there is no explicit mention of flawed reasoning in the question stem, is it correct to assume that in most cases the reasoning in the passage is valid?
Absolutely fucking not. And that's just one of many reasons why we don't read the question first. We read the passage first at LSAT Demon because you need to be the master of these arguments. You're
Yep.
not going to improve your score by 20 points if you don't actually understand what's going on with the argument.
Yeah.
Step one is, do I understand their evidence? Do I understand what they're trying to conclude based on that evidence? And do I have objections? 90% of the time, you're going to have objections if you're doing it right. I have objections 90% of the time.
hmm
10% of the time, I read it all and I go, oh, well, that was fairly straightforward. If those facts are true, that conclusion also is true. I give them a little hat tip and I go, bravo, you actually made a good argument for once. Now they can ask me whatever they want to ask me. Frequently, it does turn out to be a parallel reasoning question in that instance.
Yeah.
But if there's a flaw, it can also just turn out to be a parallel reasoning question.
Totally.
And this is how you turn hard parallel reasoning questions into very easy parallel reasoning questions. You read the argument, you spot that there's a flaw, then they say, match the logic, and you go, haha, not so fast, fuckers. That was a broken argument. You confused sufficient for necessary, or you confused correlation for causation, or you made a huge assumption, or whatever it was. You did any number of things that you could have done that were dumb.
Yeah.
Well, now when I go into the answer choices, it's like I have a shortcut because I'm just looking for the one that does the same dumb thing. If you're
hmm
matching the reasoning, well, then if the reasoning was good, you're looking for an answer that has good reasoning. But if the reasoning was bad, then you're looking for something that has bad reasoning. And one of the, I think, big reasons why people just have this, they have this myth. It's part of it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. They've decided that parallel reasoning questions are going to be hard.
hmm
But shit like this, where it's like, oh, I read the question first. I spotted that it was a parallel reasoning question. Now I expect that it's going to be hard. Then I start reading the passage and I'm expecting that it's valid logic. That is bad times because it's just not true.
Yeah.
Like half the time, it's going to be broken.
Yep.
Okay. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So Heather continues, of course, I understand that we should be able to assess the validity of an argument independently of the question stem's wording. However, I've noticed my mind naturally starting to anticipate that if the question stem doesn't specify flawed reasoning, the argument is likely valid. Okay,
Sounds
so
like Heather's reading the question
yeah,
first, right?
yeah, you shouldn't be worried about that at all. The question stem should just confirm that you're on the right track. If you read it and you're like, oh, this is a flawed argument, and then it asks for a parallel argument that is also flawed, it's just a little confirmation that, yeah, what you thought is likely true because the question confirms that. But if the question doesn't say that it's flawed, that doesn't mean that you're wrong. It just means they've decided to not give you as much information as they could have in the question step.
I apologize on behalf of all bad LSAT prep everywhere in the world, and there's a lot of it. I mean, Ben, we've been successful for a decade plus now. Basically, it's like day one of class. Okay, you can forget the gimmicks and the bullshit that Kaplan taught you or Princeton Review taught you. Like those are companies that make their money trying to get you a 5 point or a 7 point improvement. Remember Princeton's big like 7 point improvement guarantee and all that shit?
Yeah. Yeah.
With where they're just giving you a bunch of gimmicks to try to get you this like half-assed improvement.
Yeah.
And things like question first, I mean, I guess that can maybe work to get somebody from 138 to 145.
Hmm.
But what benefit is that? Because you're just really not understanding the test and you're actually hamstringing yourself for your future improvement.
Yeah.
Y- the question first hurts our students. So, Heather, real easy fix. Stop reading the question first. You'll find that you're better at attacking the arguments. You'll see the assumptions, you'll see the flaws in the arguments more clearly.
Hmm.
And then when they turn out to ask you a parallel reasoning question, you'll be like, "Yeah, but that argument was flawed." And you'll see that there's only one answer that has that flaw. And you'll start to see how easy this test can actually be.
Totally. She concludes, I was just curious if this impression aligns with what's generally observed.
No.
Nope. Thank you. Best regards. Heather. Heather, I hope that was helpful. There's some big things here, and that is don't read the question first. And yes, independently determine the validity of the argument. You can do it. And once you've done it, you're the boss. And you can just let the question be whatever it is.
There's a little LSAT logical reasoning lesson here. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's lots of multiple logical reasoning lessons, but one of the things I wanted to point out here is that I said earlier that if the argument is valid, it's more likely to be a parallel reasoning question.
Yes.
But that does not mean that just because it's a parallel reasoning question, the argument is likely to be valid.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I suppose
Yeah,
that
there's only
it,
so many questions that can be asked of a valid argument, right? What's the role? What's the main conclusion? And then parallel reasoning
right,
and must be true. That's about it.
right. But it is still also very possible that half or more of the arguments on parallel reasoning questions are broken.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
They tend to be valid more often than other questions. If they're asking you about the flaw, you know it's not a valid argument.
Yeah.
Right. If they're asking you about assumptions, you know it's not a rock solid argument. Uh, but no, there are tons of examples of parallel reasoning questions where there's a flaw, and if you see the flaw, it becomes an easy question. But if you don't see the flaw, good luck, because you're just going to be matching on like all these technicalities. You'll end up picking an argument that is logically valid when the given argument was logically flawed, and it'll be superficially similar, but you'll miss the question because it doesn't match the logic if the argument was bad in the first place.
I want to say one last thing, and that is that although there's no question stem that confirms to you that what you just read is valid, and there are question stems that confirm to you that what you just read is flawed, there is still immense value in doing the passage first, not reading the question stem, doing the passage and figuring out whether it's valid or invalid. Because when I sometimes determine that it's valid, that's rare, but I'm like, hey, that sounds good to me. And then the question stem tells me, no, it's not. By the way, it's flawed because they
Yeah.
asked for the flaw or they asked for the flawed reasoning or whatever. It's a big hit upside my head, right? It's like,
Mhm.
what? Okay, so I
Mhm.
clearly didn't understand. Whereas if you reverse that and you read the question stem first and you know that it's flawed, you're never going to be blindsided. You're just going to say, "Oh, I know it's flawed." And everybody can say that an argument is flawed without knowing why it's flawed. So a lot of
Mhm.
people get tricked into thinking that they understand the flaw simply because they know it's flawed,
Mhm.
but they actually don't. And you become
Mhm.
acutely aware of that if you make that mistake and then the question stem tells you otherwise. And that's a good thing because then you go back and you go, okay, what the hell did I miss? How is this flawed? And discovering it on your own is just so much better.
I could go all day with other examples of this. What about you read it, you thought it was flawed, and then the question says, if all of the above is true, which one of the following must be true?
Mm, mhm,
Now the disconnect that you thought you saw
mhm,
is very likely to be related to the correct answer
mhm,
because they're basically saying like, hey, in order for that to stand, you got to also have this.
mhm. Yeah.
Another example of why it's not a good idea to read the question first. What about arguments that are twice flawed? If you read that it was a flaw question, you start
You
reading
might
the
find
argument,
one, yeah,
you
and you
find the
kinda
first flaw, and you
go
go,
to sleep.
got it, cool. Let me look at the answer choices. Wait a
Yeah.
second, 3 of these answers have that flaw.
Hmm,
Huh. Yeah, well, because you weren't the master of the argument in the first place. If you would have been the
mhm.
master of the argument in the first place, you might have caught, oh, they made that flaw and they made this additional flaw. Now, when they say which one matches that flawed pattern of reasoning, you go in looking not just for the one flaw, but for 2 flaws.
Yeah,
And that's how you get into the 170s. You're not getting there based on some gimmick of like, oh, let me find the easy shortcut. I don't know. That can get you to what, low 160s or something. But if you want to make it into the higher realms, or that I think you're capable of. Like people who start out in the 140s could make it to the 170s,
mhm.
but they have to avoid these stupid gimmicky things that actually it's sort of like hamper your long-term progress in order to get a couple short-term gains.
Totally. Alright, this next one is from anonymous. The subject is LSAT addenda.
Okay, my LSAT the first time I took it is 170, present tense.
Okay.
2 months later, I retook and my LSAT came out at 166. I canceled the score. I bought Score Preview. Do you think I need to address this on addenda for schools? I think the candidate cancel may be eye catching to admissions officers, especially because it's the most recent testing cycle on my record. Basically, I got COVID the day before the test, was unable to sleep, and powered through test day on caffeine. I already knew it was bad when I woke up that day. If an addenda, what should I convey? FYI, if it helps, I'm trying to apply to the T14s. I am not URM. I have no tier 1 or 2 softs. Huh? And my GPA is above all schools' 75th percentile. Thanks so much, Anonymous. What do you think? You want to write an LSAT addenda?
No, I don't think you need to. And I'm also wondering why you're not taking the test again. If you took it a second time because you believed you could do better than 170, you got a 166 and you knew it was because of COVID. What? Huh? Let's take the test again. Let's get a 175. You're looking at the T14s. If you can do better, you should try.
Yeah, your GPA is great, but that 170 is mediocre for the T14s.
Mhm.
I mean, you're making your GPA sad. You think you can do better. We believe that you can do better. You're a 170 in the eyes of the school. They only care about your highest score. So the fact that you canceled it doesn't change the fact that you're a 170 in their eyes. Writing an addendum here, I believe, would only hurt you, not help you. But what are you going to say? I shouldn't have taken the test? They're going to think, well, why didn't you withdraw? You know, like your whole thing about I was unable to sleep. I took it with COVID. I powered through on caffeine. They're going to be like, oh, so is that how you're going to behave in law school?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just not like that's not a point in your favor. So omit.
Mhm.
But most importantly, take the test again. Wait another cycle if necessary. If you want to get into the very best law schools, you need the best LSAT you can achieve. It sounds to me like somebody who's trying to force in an application this cycle, excuse me, this cycle instead of, playing the longer game and getting that 175 or whatever that they are. Their PTs probably have shown that they're capable of mid 170s. That's why they took it again. So you should take it again.
Exactly.
Next one is from
Wait,
Ethan.
really
Oh,
quick, Nathan, before we go on, I want to talk about the email exchange that we had with Leslie. Leslie is our personal statement editor, admissions
yeah, yeah.
advisor. She attended a workshop or something with admissions folks at various schools. And one thing that came up was the fact that some schools take emails that you send to the school and they attach those emails to your application.
Oh,
So there's a couple things we could talk about with this email, but the only to keep this simple and an easy takeaway, you're you wrote softs and you put it in quotation marks, and then you put your comma outside the quotation marks. Your comma actually needs to go inside the quotation marks. What you're doing is British English, and since you're applying to American law schools, you need to do American English, which is to put the comma inside of the quotation marks. I mean, that's a small thing, but it's a mistake that a lot of people make. And just FYI for everyone out there, that's where it needs to go. And when you're writing emails to the schools, more importantly, make sure that they're formatted, punctuated correctly, that they make sense, because multiple people in the admissions office are likely to see them.
yeah. Polite.
Yes.
Don't include a bunch of red flags. Don't overshare things. You might think that you've developed a special relationship with that person in the admissions office. You
Yeah,
might
they've opened
overshare with them.
you've opened up too much. Yeah.
Their job is to get you to apply. Once you're applying, they've got out of you what they want to get out of you. And if they find anything uh suspect in your, or they might, without even thinking about it, they might just attach every piece of correspondence to your application. And if I was a professor, if I was on that committee where it was like, well, okay, we can only admit half these people we have to cut. And I'm just paging through the application. I'd be going through the applications looking for reasons to get rid of people. And if I see typos, spelling mistakes, grammar mistakes, um, casual oversharing of inappropriate stuff, just anything that indicates a lack of judgment or really any reason, right? It's all I'm looking for is a reason.
Yeah.
I
And
see that reason and I go, nah,
it's attention to detail, right? Attorneys
yeah,
are notoriously judged on their attention to detail.
yeah,
How did you write this? Did you make mistakes? Did you have parallel sentences? What is going on here? And so it's just another way to look at someone's work and
yeah,
say, okay, their guard is down a little bit because they don't think they're submitting it as part of their application. They're not
right.
putting it through Grammarly. They're not doing all that stuff. So, anyways,
I
just
appreciate that Leslie brought that to our attention. Any correspondence that you send to a school might be attached to your application when they're making the decision about whether to admit you and whether to offer you scholarship money. So
mhm.
you want to have your shit tight when you're talking to these schools. We used to, Ben, for the first, 300 episodes of the Thinking
Yeah,
LSAT podcast, we
we
used
were
to
harsh.
dunk on people's punctuation, grammar, spelling. We used to always dunk on people for this. Now, I don't know, we're kind of kinder, gentler Thinking
Mhm.
LSAT these days, but maybe we need to return to a bit more of that tough love. Like, because you pointed out the last thing in Anonymous's email.
Yeah.
But what about the very first sentence where he weirdly uses the present tense, then starts talking in the past tense? I
Yeah.
mean, that's I'm looking at this in Google Drive, Google
Yeah.
Documents,
Mhm.
and Google Docs is giving me the blue squiggly
Yeah.
on is 170.
Mhm.
That's in your first sentence. There are other things,
Yeah.
but okay. Hopefully that was helpful for Anonymous.
Yeah.
Next one, Ethan writes in with a subject late section anxiety. We have a note here that says Ethan scored 150 on his diagnostic. Now he's getting 2 or 3 questions wrong out of the 21 or 22 that he attempts in LR timed sections. So what's before we read Ethan's email, what's the demon understanding heuristic, or DUH for short, say
Yeah. So,
about Ethan's understanding of the test?
so you just, I think what you suggested makes a lot of sense. And that was we simplify this heuristic even more and just take the number of questions you're getting wrong, here 2 to 3, you multiply that by 2, so 4 to 6. So you're not understanding 4 to 6 questions that you're attempting.
Out of 21 or 22 attempted. So you're not understanding roughly a quarter of the
Hmm.
questions that you're attempting.
Yeah.
Okay. But lots to be excited about here. 150 is a fantastic diagnostic.
Hmm.
And if you're now getting 18 out of 21
Hmm.
on timed sections, that's a hell of a lot better than 150. So
Hmm.
this is somebody who already, started in the 150s and is already in the 160s.
Hmm.
The way to get to the 170s is to minimize your mistakes. Don't race to the end of the section. Minimize your mistakes, thoroughly review those mistakes. All right, should we read Ethan's email?
Yeah, Ethan writes, my issue is that when I get to the 5 minutes remaining mark, I immediately get flustered and can't focus for the life of me.
Oh,
I know I.
so that's so common.
Yep.
And the thing I want to just sorry to interrupt, but the thing I
Mm,
want to encourage Ethan to do, start with baby steps. You need to understand that everybody panics at the 5-minute mark. Okay?
mhm,
Weird shit happens in the at the 2-minute warning of the fourth quarter,
mhm,
right? People
mhm.
fuck up. You want to be the one person in the room. You're going to differentiate yourself by getting one more question right. That's all. That's your job. In those 5 minutes, get one question right. And if you can do that, maybe you can get another one right.
Yeah,
But what you're doing right now is what everybody does, which is you try to do 5 questions in 5 minutes and you just miss all of them.
yeah, yep. Instead of a glass half empty mentality, have a glass half full, right? Basically,
Yes.
oh, I did a question in the 5 minutes that were remaining, and I felt very good about that. So that's a win,
Oh, yeah.
not looking at the questions you didn't get to and looking at them as
Right.
a loss.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and also I know what all my competitors are gonna do in the last
Mm,
5 minutes. They're gonna
mhm,
do what I used to do in the last
mhm,
5 minutes, which was to panic and do 5 questions and miss all of them.
mhm.
Instead, I'm gonna bubble in the guesses. As soon as the 5-minute warning pops up, I'm just gonna guess on the remaining questions.
Yep.
That's gonna take 15 seconds. Then I'm gonna go back to whatever question I was working on, and I'm just gonna see if I can solve that one question, because if I can get that 1 point, that's
Mhm.
1 point that my competitors and the old me wasn't getting. Okay.
Cool. Ethan continues, I know I could at least be getting up to question 24 to 26 if I could just ignore the time completely. I can just not get over this hump. I'd love to hear what you guys think. Ideally, I'd like to get to 168 plus, but I'm worried that this late test anxiety is going to ruin my chances. Thank you guys for your time. Best, Ethan. You can get there. Diagnostic 150, you just have to practice getting used to ignoring the time and letting go of it. I think what we already talked about is the key.
Yeah. I guess I would like to add, similar to your glass half full idea from earlier,
Mhm.
Ethan, you gotta be maybe practice some gratitude for where you're at. Okay. You started in a fantastic spot. 150 is a great diagnostic.
Mhm.
I expect that you're gonna get to 170. But what you're doing right now, Ethan, is you're like fixated on the 168 and you
Mhm.
want it right now. And
Mhm.
you think you have to do 24 to 26 questions in the section in order to get that 168, which, by the way, you don't.
Yeah.
I mean, you could be knocking on the door of that number right now if you would just clean up your mistakes. If you're attempting 21 or 22 questions on timed sections of logical reasoning, but you're missing 2 or 3 of them, you're so worried about the 2 or 3 that you're not getting to, that you're not paying enough attention to the 2 or 3 that you're missing. And it's
Yeah.
far easier to clean up those 2 or 3 that you're missing. Not only that, but you'll understand the test better and you will go faster in the long run. But this pursuit of speed in the midterm
Mhm.
is actually preventing you from making it to your long-term goal. So let go of the score, let go of how many questions there are in the section, and get back to the business of just solving one question at a time. I know you can do it, Ethan. but you have to solve the question you're working on.
Hmm.
You can't you can't be doing math of like how many minutes are remaining and how many questions are remaining and I think I could finish the section. Yeah, I know. I know. But we're working on this one right now. So let's solve this one and then we move on to the next one. That's your best recipe for long-term success. And I think it'll help you in the short term as well.
Yeah, I also wonder if Ethan is taking 20 seconds, 15 seconds to select an answer for the remaining questions when the 5-minute warning pops up, because that can relieve some tension as well, right? So you have 5 questions left at the 5-minute warning. Fine. Go select C or B or D or whatever answer you want for those remaining questions so that if you don't get to them, you don't have to worry about not having given an answer at all.
Perfect. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a very powerful trick. 5-minute warning pops up, you just bubble in your guesses.
Yep.
And then you get to forget about it. Those are free points. And another way, I was talking about this with LSAT Demon tutor Robert on our tutor Slack the other day. I was talking about with him um, the idea that you actually have to invest. Your guesses are worth something. Your guesses are worth 1/5 of a point. When you bubble in
Mhm.
a guess, you're going to get it right 1 out of 5 times. In economist terms, that's an expected value of 1/5 of a percent or one
Mhm.
fifth of a point,
Yeah.
2/10 of a point. And you might imagine, okay, if I'm going to attempt this question,
Mhm.
not only am I going to spend whatever time I'm going to spend on it, but I'm also going to invest the 2/10 of a point that I get for free. It's like I'm dropping that 2/10 of a point into a slot with the intention of turning it into a one, but you can
Yeah.
also turn it into a zero.
Yeah. By
So,
rushing through that
of
question. Yeah.
course, if you're
Yeah.
trying to do the next one while you're doing this one, or if you're worried about the last one while you're
Mhm.
doing this one, then you're likely to fall into some traps, misunderstand, not really get it. And you're going to turn a free 1/5 of a point into a very expensive zero
Mhm.
because you invested the time and the 1/5 of a point in order to bother attempting that question. So I would say the lesson for Ethan is not to strive to do more questions. In fact, Ethan, your score would go up immediately if you only did 20 questions and got them all right
Mhm.
instead of 21 to 22, but missing two or three.
Yeah.
Okay, time
Excellent.
for Brian.
Yeah, Brian's subject is applying to schools outside of state where I intend to practice.
This is our new feature. What's the deal with Tulane University School of Law?
Okay.
Eric did some research. Okay, anyway, I'll read Brian's email.
Sure.
Hello, Brian and Nathan. I hope you're both. What?
Brian? Yeah.
Brian says, hello, Ben and Nathan. I hope you're both doing well. I started with the demon at a 138 diagnostic, and after 2 years of dedicated studying, I finished with a 167.
Damn, that's a long journey, but it's also a steep climb. I mean, that is radically different. 29 points up. Good job.
29-point improvement. Yeah, fantastic, Brian. I mean, like, that's 10 points is a life changing improvement.
Yeah.
So
Is
you've changed your
29
life
3 lives? Is that
3
3 life?
times. Yeah. I mean, okay. Brian continues. My GPA is 3.77 and I am applying for fall of 2025. I completed my applications for all the law schools in Texas and I'm now considering whether I should apply out of state. I intend to practice in Texas and I'm very family oriented. So being far from home might affect my success in law school. However, I'm curious if applying out of state could help me leverage scholarships or other potential benefits. Best Brian. So then Eric used law school transparency to search for schools with graduates working in Texas.
Okay.
The out of state school with the highest percentage of graduates working in Texas is 19.3% from Tulane. So 19.3% of graduates from Tulane end up working in Texas. So, what's the deal, Ben, with Tulane University School of Law?
Let's take a look. Let's click on the 509 report here. You can find this by going to lsatdemon.com/scholarships. You'll see a list of all the ABA accredited schools. Among that list, of course, is Tulane. And then right next to Tulane, you'll see a PDF, and that PDF icon will take you to its 509 report, which is an ABA required disclosure. So the schools have to give us all sorts of details about the people they've accepted. Um, and this is a document you should be familiar with when you're applying to law school. If you're not, you're not looking at very valuable information with the schools that you're about to negotiate with.
I don't know much at all about Tulane. The first thing I'm learning is that Tulane is located in New Orleans, Louisiana.
Okay.
New Orleans is a cool town. I don't know how into the scene of New Orleans you are,
Hmm.
but spending 3 years living somewhere is a big deal, right? It's a not insignificant portion of your life. And so you'd want to think about the climate of New Orleans, the culture of New Orleans, the possibility that you might end up working in New Orleans, Louisiana long term. I know you say you want to stay in Texas, but shit can happen in 3 years. So the location matters a lot here. For me, that's not a bad location. I mean, too hot half the year, but not a terrible place to live in my estimation. But everybody else's mileage is going to vary on that.
So I want to agree with you on the location bit. I think that location is important for all the reasons you said. At the same time, I don't want people to give so much weight to it that they give up good offers. I mean, I think there's a lot at play, right? And it's 3 years. Looking back, that's going to be quick, and it could be an experience. Like, let me go see what it's like to live somewhere else and live in New York or live in New
To
Orleans,
to be
even if
clear
I
though,
want to go back. Yeah.
to be clear, that the last thing you said is a very bad reason to go to law school. We see lots of 21-year-olds who like never really lived
Mm-hmm.
and they like want, or even we see 30-year-olds or 40-year-olds who are like, well, I really want the experience of going away to school and I'm going to go to law school so that and it's like, okay, wait a second. This is not undergrad. It's different. And the people who go to law school for social reasons, the people who go to law school for parties or whatever, it's just such an enormous waste of time. So please don't think that's what we're saying. All we're saying here is that 3 years of your life is a significant investment, and you should consider whether it's the type of place that you could see yourself comfortably living for 3 years.
And also, if it's not the ideal place, don't let, I don't know, the desire for the location to be ideal dissuade you from going to a school that's free, that's offering you a stipend, that's well ranked, that could, I mean, 3 years is, yeah, it's a long time, but it's also like no time at all.
No, it'll also be here in the blink of an eye, and you'll either have $200,000 of debt or not.
Yeah.
You know, and so that is a big deal. Yeah, the price is always going to be what most important factor.
I think it's pretty damn close. Yeah.
And I mean, that really shows how crazy the law school pricing system is, right?
Hmm.
Like, if price should be in any sensible world, this thing is so expensive that price should be number one,
Hmm.
but it can't be because of the fucked up games that they play with scholarships. So every school, let's see what tuition, let's see what Tulane's nominal tuition is, and then we'll try to figure out what Tulane's actual tuition is.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So scrolling down to the second page of the 509 report, we see resident and non-resident tuition. Holy shit. $63,000 per year
Hmm.
plus another $4,700 in fees. So you're knocking on the door of $70,000 a year
Yeah.
to attend Tulane, which is a pretty middling law school. Back up to the first page, LSAT median of 161. GPA median of 3.64. I mean, that's just not, those numbers are not prestigious. That's not like the kinds of numbers where it's like, holy shit, like there's nothing but smart people go here. Nothing but really accomplished people go here. That's just not true at Tulane.
Yeah.
It's people who got okay grades, oh, barely okay LSAT. For somebody like Brian with a 167 and a 3.77, I would be expecting full ride plus to really justify going to a school like Tulane if I was Brian. But
Exactly.
what's their real tuition, Ben?
Well, that's a good question. I went over, we can look at the 509. And I think it's important for people to understand that, but you can also look at our tuition roll call and see that,
How many people pay full price? That's the thing I really want to know. How many people
yeah,
actually
15%.
pay? Okay. So to finish my previous point, which is
Hmm.
a point that I make on every damn episode of this show. So I'm sorry, but they like price should be the first thing we think about when we think about whether it's worth making this huge investment of our
Hmm.
time
Hmm.
and our money.
Yeah.
But no, it's not possible because they have a nominal tuition of $68,000 a year.
Hmm.
Yeah, knocking on the door of $70,000 a year.
Yeah.
And then they give some discount to 85% of the people who attend. And it's not like those are small discounts. Those are significant discounts. 32% of the people in the class are getting something not quite half, right? So
Hmm.
anywhere between $1 and half of the tuition, which here again would be 30 something thousand dollars. 33% of the class gets something like half tuition off.
Hmm.
Another 52% of the class, Ben, more people than not, get somewhere between half and full tuition off.
Yeah.
So again, to wrap it all up, it's a almost $70,000 thing,
Hmm.
but you won't find out until after you apply and are admitted how much it will actually cost you because 52% of the class is going to get something more than a 50% discount. So it's like, I guess you could do the math on it to try to figure out what the actual real tuition is at Tulane. But I think it's something more like $30,000 a year.
Something around there. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, that's the deal with Tulane, and that's the deal with basically every other law school.
Yeah.
Um, what else do we want to say about Tulane?
I don't know if I have more to say about Tulane other than it is surprising that 19% end up working in Texas. I guess it shouldn't be that surprising, but it's a lot. So you could definitely go to a school like that, and it's not unreasonable at all to end up back in Texas. I would 100% apply, going back to Brian's question, I would 100% apply to several out of state schools, even if you have no intention of attending. It's wild how your mind can change when those offers come in. If a school from some state that you had never considered living in comes back with a stipend, it could look wildly appealing.
Yeah. I mean, it's not that surprising that so many people end up working in Texas. I just mapped it. It's a 5.5 hour drive from New Orleans to Houston.
Hmm.
And Houston's a big ass city.
There's a lot of people there. Yeah, sure.
And it's basically the same part of the world, right? I mean, New Orleans is on the Gulf of Mexico. Houston is on the Gulf of Mexico.
Hmm.
It's only few more hours to Dallas, Fort Worth, San Antonio. Like all the big cities in Texas are within a day's drive of New Orleans. For people who
Hmm.
live in that part of the world, those are nothing drives, by the way.
Hmm.
I mean, like people in Texas drive hours just all the time.
Hmm.
So that's not, I don't think that's going to be something that would prohibit. It shouldn't be, I don't think, something that would prohibit someone like Brian from attending Tulane. I'd look at the price for sure. And the only way you're going to find that out, and this is the fucked up thing about this system, right? Is that you have to apply broadly so that you can get the actual price. It's just the only way to do it.
Yeah, that's the cost of seeing the pricing schedule.
And it's the cost in like broader societal terms. It's
Hmm.
the cost of the fact that the American Bar Association allows law schools to do this kind of discounting.
Mhm.
If this kind of discounting was not allowed, if they had like transparent pricing,
Mhm.
then you wouldn't have to waste everybody's time by applying to 15 or 20 schools.
Yeah.
But the system is rigged in favor of the schools.
Mhm.
They don't want you to know the price.
No.
They don't want you to have any idea how much money other people are paying to go to their school.
Well, they want you to believe actually in the nominal price. They want you to believe
Right.
in that. Yeah.
Well,
It's
because
a
they are
fiction that's
charging
held up.
the 15% of just pure suckers who
Yeah.
are paying full tuition at Tulane.
Yeah.
You know, like what must that feel like to look around the room knowing, well, more than half of you are paying less than half of what I'm paying to be here.
Oof. Well, that's the sad thing is that a lot of those folks, if you end up in that position, it's because you never came across the idea or the notion that there might be discounted pricing. And
Which
so
the
it's
law
very
schools foster. I mean,
oh,
there's like this
yeah.
culture of secrecy, that's not, it's kind of untoward to be talking about
Talking
the
about your
scholarships that you've
scholarship.
received.
Yeah. Like
Yeah,
you're
I mean,
very
this
fortunate to get it
it's
among
not limited to law school, by the way. This happens at all levels of education. I remember
yeah.
in my MBA program, I was one
Mm,
of 4 people who were there on a full ride
mm,
out of like 50 people in my class.
mm,
And the 4 of us, we knew who was who,
mhm.
but we didn't advertise it to the rest of the class because you'd look like a dick,
Yeah.
but it's in the school's best interest that they
You
maintain
don't
that
advertise.
system.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you're gonna you that you want they want to be able to soak the people who are paying full price,
Mhm.
and they're gonna pay you to go there because of Brian. Your LSAT and your GPA is what's gonna make Tulane give you a very attractive price.
Mhm.
And if they don't, that's an easy just okay, never mind, Tulane.
Mhm. Mhm.
For you, Brian,
Yeah.
not for everybody. I'm just saying, Brian, because of your LSAT and your GPA, you're an extremely competitive applicant for a school like Tulane. Um, One other thing I wanted to point out about Tulane, they do not offer conditional scholarships. That's at the bottom of the second page of
Mhm.
their 509. So they're not among the worst offenders of schools that have the sort of gotcha scholarships where,
Mhm.
you get the scholarship and then they take it away from you based on you didn't finish in the top third of the class or whatever.
Yeah.
They're not doing that, which is good. Anything else you want to say about Tulane?
Um, Nothing about Tulane.
Okay.
I'm looking at the estimator right now. I put in Brian's numbers, by the way, the
Mhm.
3.77 and the 167. And I'm seeing Baylor, which Brian has presumably applied to because that's in Texas. That's
Yep.
offering a possible stipend. Then right below that, the University of Kansas School of Law. It's in Kansas, but they're offering a possible stipend for your numbers, likely. And it's an estimate. Who knows what will actually happen? You have to apply and see. But then there's Tennessee. I mean, a lot of these schools are not too far from you. Arizona as well, not surprisingly. Um, Boy, you could be going and they could be giving you money, possibly.
Yeah, yeah. How many law schools are in Texas?
I don't know, but I would guess like 7 to 10, something like
Where's
that.
the
It's a lot.
search, Ben, in on the
Uh,
scholarship estimator?
It's at the bottom of the page. Just put
Oh, the
in
bottom of the
Texas.
page.
Yep. Okay. So if I just put in TX, I
Oh,
got
yeah, there it
one,
is.
2, 3, 10. There's 10.
Yeah, from Texas, ranked 16th, to Texas Southern, ranked 180th. And with Brian's numbers, I mean, did we actually put it in? Yeah, so 167, 3.77.
There's three possible stipends just within Texas, and then two possible full tuitions.
Yeah,
Of course, some
Baylor,
of these
Houston, and Texas
yeah.
Tech should all actually pay Brian for going there.
hmm In theory, right? Of course, this is just an estimator and it's based on last year's data. Things could change both positively or negatively. You could see more schools offering Brian a stipend for who knows what reason. You
Well,
could see
especially
fewer schools.
the
Yeah.
even higher ranked schools, right? I mean, Baylor and Texas Tech and Houston are 46, 68, and 82 in the country.
hmm
He should also be getting significant scholarship offers from South Texas, St. Mary's, North Texas, and Texas Southern, ranked
hmm
150th down to 180th. I mean, they should be rolling out the red carpet for somebody like Brian.
Yeah.
So I'm glad to hear you're applying broadly, Brian. I do think it would make sense to add a few more schools to that list. 10's a great start. but I've just never heard anybody regret applying to 20 schools.
No. It it costs money and a little time now, but boy, we're talking about so much more money on the line. I just can't imagine not doing it that way.
I wish we could catch the ear of somebody at the ABA and get them to, e- either get rid of the scholarship game that just say you can't give scholarships.
Mhm.
Say you have to charge everybody one price,
Yeah.
or figure out some other way to create transparent pricing. Like when you apply to every law school, like a truly common app where when you
Mm.
apply, your application goes into every single school, and every single school then it's on
Has
them to
to
make you an offer.
yeah.
Because
Hmm.
otherwise it's like a system that is purpose built to take advantage of less savvy applicants.
Yeah, the less savvy you are, the fewer schools you apply to and the less information you have about your worth in the market.
Maybe I mean, maybe it's just capitalism, and I'm sure it is capitalism, right? Like cars are
Yeah.
priced the same way,
Yeah.
right? Houses are kind of priced the same way. Where it's like there's a price, but you have to make an offer to see if that's the actual price.
Mhm.
I don't know.
It's a
I mean,
little less egregious, but yeah.
but I also just mentioned like two of the sleaziest possible, like why is law school priced that way?
Yeah.
Why can't law school be priced like Costco, where it's like that you're getting a good value. Here's the price. We're not bullshitting. That's just what it is.
Well, actually, part of the problem, right? It's all connected, and part of the problem is the fact that the ABA is requiring schools to essentially be the same, and because they have to be the same, the only way to distinguish themselves is through the numbers that their student body brings to the school, which then affects the ranking. Like if you could compete on the basis of something else, oh, we offer the best environmental law program, and it's actually the best environmental law program, not just some nominal thing that they trot out in their advertising, then maybe you could actually win, even though you're losing in other ways.
Hmm. Yeah.
Anyways, good
Thanks,
luck,
Brian.
Brian. Keep us posted. This next email is from Connor. It's about UGPA in admissions. UGPA is your undergraduate GPA. Several listeners asked about this apparently.
Says, hi, Ben and Nathan. I was curious, period. That's a sentence.
Yeah, it is.
I'm at the University of Tennessee, where unfortunately they do not give A plus grades. I have a 4.0 currently, but am I still at a disadvantage to applicants from schools who give A plus grades? Some of my numerical grades would be considered A plus if that was an option. Is there any way around this or other ways to strengthen my application, or should I just accept it?
I don't think there's a way around it.
Yeah, I mean, my gut says depending on where you're applying, I suppose it could be worth a very short addendum that just says,
Recalculate your grades based on that. You could say, hey, if we
yeah.
actually, yeah,
I mean, or just my school doesn't give A pluses. My 4.0 is the best GPA it's possible to achieve at the University of Tennessee.
yeah,
That's pretty good.
that's pretty good.
I don't mind the recalculation though. Yeah. I mean, if you did
Just give
recalculate it
them a
and you were
number.
like, hey,
Yeah,
on a, if my school offered A pluses, I would actually have a 4.2
yeah,
or whatever, 4.1 or whatever it is. I don't know. Either one of those, I could see that seems kind of worth it. But it's because the 4.0 is so powerful. Like
yeah,
if you maintain that 4.0, Connor, if you can really say this is the highest GPA that's possible to achieve at the University of Tennessee,
yeah,
that's a very powerful fact in your favor. And I probably would include it in an addendum.
yeah. Hey, side note, just this morning I was meeting with the designers on the final touches for the GPA calculator.
Okay.
So that will be launching soon.
Fantastic. What's the GPA calculator going to do?
Allows students to add the credits from their transcript to the site and it will calculate their LSAC GPA, the GPA that they would be submitting to law schools.
Fantastic. That's great
Yeah,
news. They could then turn around and use that number in our scholarship estimator to figure out
exactly.
what kinds of offers that GPA might get them. Your GPA, once this thing launches, your GPA might be higher or might be lower because of LSAC rules for trying to equivocate GPAs from one school to another. Um, that's great. Glad that's still in progress. Last item on, oh no, sorry, two more items. We have tips from a departing demon.
All right, this is from Russell. Russell, wow, went from practice tests in the 140s to a best practice test of 171. That's incredible. Um, Russell writes, trust the process, slow down, read what it is saying, and find the answer that answers the question.
I laugh because it's like, Russell, you are now an LSAT teacher. I mean, that's what we do. We just constantly tell people, slow
State the
down,
obvious.
read it again. Nope. Read it again. Okay. One more time. Read it again. Read that answer again. Does it actually answer the question? No, I didn't think so. Okay. So read another answer. Does that answer the question? Oh, see how one of the answers actually answers the question based on meaning?
Yeah.
Fantastic, Russell. That's I swear to God, it's half of what I say to people as an LSAT teacher.
Yeah. Russell continues, the methodology for this test is the same as everything else in life.
Oh,
Spend an hour a day working on it, comma, don't let it control you.
huh. So if you wanted to work on your fitness 1
Hmm.
hour a day,
Yeah. Reasonable.
I can see that. Yeah. Like there's no value obsessing about it 24 hours a day because you're not going to make progress that way. It's not sustainable. But if you just kind of chip away at it, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of the other things, you can do a good job at all of your various priorities in life. Thank you, Russell. Last item is our word of the week. In a recent class report for Story Time with LSAT Mom, Becca, teacher Becca, she's OG LSAT demon teacher from way back.
Yeah.
She was here at the very beginning, like in the COVID times. She just came back and taught a series of classes about reading comprehension. And she wrote that she got way too excited about the word awful. OFFAL.
Okay.
Do you know what that word means, Ben? Out devoid of context? Do you know what awful is?
I feel
OFFAL?
like okay, so I don't. I feel like I'm tainted by the fact that I've probably seen this passage before. I believe it has to do with smell.
Oh. Um and maybe the word olfactory is giving you
Yeah.
that sense.
Yeah.
That's not really quite right, I don't think.
Okay.
The context here says some manufacturers are already making use of quote designed offal in the manufacture of metals and some plastics, colon. And when they do that colon, that's where they then explain to you what they just said,
Yeah.
right? So
Hmm.
designed offal, what's that? Well, tailoring the production of waste from a manufacturing process so that the waste can be fed directly back into that process or a related one.
Mm.
Designed offal. What do you think offal means now?
Yeah. Wow. So I'm actually still not sure whether it's referring to the recycled material or the process of recycling the material that would have otherwise been waste.
Hmm. Uh, in culinary terms,
Yeah.
if you ever have done any fine dining, you
Mm.
might notice that they get fancy and use offal in their very fancy dishes.
Mm.
Like at the higher level restaurant, it's kind of funny because the lower level or the higher level, you're more likely to be served offal.
Oh, geez. Okay, so they're gonna it is the recycled material itself.
I think that it's waste. So
Yeah.
in food terms, depending on your culture, uh, things like hearts, kidneys,
Yeah.
intestines, brains, those are things that are eaten in some cultures or in some cuisines and are not eaten in other cultures and other cuisines.
Mm.
But in that context, at least, awful means waste
Hmm.
stuff.
Hmm.
And notice, Ben, that the word waste was used twice here.
Yeah.
the production of waste from a manufacturing process so that the waste can be fed directly back into that process.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I think a synonym of awful is going to be waste.
I'm also reading this again. It says some manufacturers are already making use. You're going to make use of a thing. So,
Yeah, and in the
so
context of that passage, it was clear what they were doing. I mean,
mhm.
that in the context of the passage, it's like, okay, so instead of just having scrap that goes to the landfill, we're
Mhm.
going to engineer our process in the first place so that there is no scrap.
Mhm.
This stuff is, we're going to think about it in advance what we're going to do with this stuff and we're going to feed it back into some other process. Looking up the definition, it's a noun, awful. First definition on Merriam-Webster rather, is the waste or byproduct of a process, such as the trimmings of a hide, like the belly, head, or shoulders,
Mm.
the byproducts of milling, like wheat or barley that then goes in and they use it for stock feed, or yeah, the viscera and trimmings of a butchered animal removed for preparing it for market or consumption, also known as variety meat.
Hot dogs?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got to think that there's quite a bit of variety meat going into your hot dog or sausage of choice.
Well,
Okay.
that's a great word. Yeah.
That is a good word. I'm glad Becca got so excited about that. Thank you, Becca.
Thank you. Be LSAT famous. Please ask questions or share news with us on our website, thinkinglsat.com, or on socials at lsatdemon.com. If you watch us on YouTube, please subscribe. If you listen to us anywhere else, please follow us. If you have questions about the LSAT Demon, email help@lsatdemon.com. You can also check out our other podcast, LSAT Demon Daily. That was episode 479 of the Thinking LSAT podcast. Thanks all y'all for listening. Nice knowing ya. Don't pay for law school.